Aileen Wuornos is an infamous name that shook America to its core in the late 80s and early 90s. Often labelled as America's first female serial killer, Wuornos was a complex figure, a victim, a predator, and a reflection of society's darkest corners. In today's video, we'll explore her troubled life, her path to becoming a serial killer, and the legacy she left behind. Aileen Carol Wuornos was born on February 29, 1956, in a town called Rochester, Michigan, into a life of tragedy from the very beginning. Her father was incarcerated for child molestation before she was even born, and eventually committed suicide in prison. Her mother abandoned her and her brother, leaving them to be raised by their grandparents, but even in their care, it wasn't easy. Wuornos suffered physical and sexual abuse, and by the age of 11, she had turned to prostitution to survive. She was homeless for much of her youth, drifting through life in a search for stability. Those early experiences of neglect, abandonment, and violence were a grim foundation of what's to come. As a young adult, Aileen began a life of crime. She was arrested multiple times for theft, assault, and disorderly conduct. It seemed like trouble followed her wherever she went. Her existence was transient, moving from one place to another, surviving through sex work, petty crime, and living always on the edge of society. In 1986, she met Tyria Moore, who became her lover and partner. Their relationship seemed to offer Wuornos a sense of belief and belonging, but it also was during this time that her crimes would escalate into something more sinister. Between 1989 and 1990, Wuornos committed a string of murders that would make her infamous. She shot and killed 7 men in Florida, all of whom had picked her up while she was working as a prostitute. Her first victim was Richard Mallory, a convicted rapist who had picked her up off the side of the road. Wuornos claimed she killed him in self-defense after he violently sodomized and assaulted her. However, this self-defense claim became less plausible as more bodies turned up. All of the victims were shot at close range with a .22 caliber pistol, and while Wuornos insisted that each killing was in response to violent attacks against her, the evidence did not always support that theory. The line between victim and predator was starting to blur. While much discussion and thought is always put towards the first murder, we'll go quickly through the details of the other murders that helped build the case against Aileen. There was David Spears, a 47-year-old construction worker who was found naked and dead in June of 1990 after being shot 6 times. There was Charles Carskadon, a 40-year-old part-time rodeo worker who was also found in June 1990. However, he was shot 9 times. She did, however, try and cover the body with an electric blanket. Then there's Peter Seams, a 65-year-old retiree whose body was never found. However, Aileen and her partner were seen abandoning the car, and a handprint was found inside the door. Then she turned to Troy Barres, a sausage salesman at just 50 years old, found in August 1990 being shot twice. She then moved on to Charles Humphreys, a retired army major and child abuse investigator who was also the chief of police, found in September of 1990 being shot 7 times across his head and torso. Finally, and lastly, there was Walter Antonio, a 61-year-old trucker who was found in November 1990 after being stripped and shot 4 times. In January of 1991, Wuornos was finally arrested after a nationwide manhunt. Her girlfriend Tyria Moore cooperated with the police and helped to secure her confession. This betrayal, along with the overwhelming evidence, sealed her fate. Wuornos' trial was widely publicised as she made no effort to conceal her anger towards society. She was convicted on 6 counts of murder and sentenced to death. In 1992, throughout the trial, she maintained that her killings were an act of self-defense, but her erratic behaviour and outbursts in court painted a more complex picture of a deeply, deeply disturbed woman. Aileen Wuornos' life and crimes have sparked debates about justice, mental illness, and how society treats its most vulnerable. Was she a cold-blooded killer, or was she the product of the horrific circumstances she was forced to endure? Wuornos herself seems to embody this contradiction. In prison, she would oscillate between anger, remorse, and even apathy. She became a media sensation with documentaries, movies, and books being made about her, including the 2003 film Monster, With Charlize Theron's portrayal of Wuornos won her an Academy Award, but beyond the media frenzy, her case raises important questions. How does society handle individuals who are both victims and perpetrators? And could her life have taken a different turn if she had received the help she so desperately needed early on in her life? After years of appeals, Aileen Wuornos was executed by lethal injection on October the 9th, 2002 at the age of 46. In her final days, she claimed that her mind had been tampered with, that her execution was a form of her revenge. Her final words were chilling. "I'd just like to say, I'm sailing with the Rock, and I'll be back like Independence Day with Jesus. June 6, like the movie, big mothership and all, I'll be back." Her death brought an end to one of the most notorious criminal sagas in American history, but her story continues to haunt people to this day. Regardless of right or wrong, Aileen was a deeply troubled woman who committed horrific crimes. But her life is a reflection of many failures. Failures of family, society, and the system that couldn't prevent her spiral into violence. She remains a polarizing figure, forcing us to examine the fine line between victim and predator. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Do you think she's a cold-blooded killer or a victim of her circumstances? Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I might end up doing a few more of these deep dives into history's most chilling cases.